Hi, I'm Chris Pierson. You may remember me from reading my lips earlier. I am the chief world builder and designated lore monkey for Lord of the Rings Online, and I'm here with Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor from Mythgard, and Michael Drout, professor of English and Tolkien, and as I said before, whatnot.
Which is the most difficult stuff to grade,
It really
honestly.
is, it is. And earlier we were trying to discuss, Corey's playing through Arnor right now, particularly Evendim and Numenos, as part of his what's the name of the program you're doing?
Well, Mythgard Mondays.
Mythgard Mondays.
Yeah, we have
on
our Mythgard kinship on the Landrevel server,
right.
And we get together on Monday nights to do some questing and do some lore talk and everything.
And so in the meantime, I'm working madly with the rest of the design team on fleshing out, finally getting to the heart of Gondor. Which never thought we'd get there, but I'm really happy to see some of the stuff unfolding that we've got cooking right now for the next update. So there's a lot of Numenorian, Dunedain kind of stuff going on right now, and I wanted to get your perspectives on particularly Arnor, but I know you've at least glimpsed Gondor, Michael, and the sort of ways we've been able to play with the lore, and also ways that you would like to see, things you might like to see us work in at some point from the lore that we haven't yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing that I think is so cool about the Arnor stuff are the ways in which we get glimpses of these different periods in the Numenorian history, or the Arnorian history, right? Where we can see the remnants of the later days, the last days of the Kingdom of Arnor when it divided into the three kingdoms. And I have found it to be very useful in talking through with people. It's so easy to get confused about the different Dunedain kingdoms and not to be able to tell the difference between Rhudaur and Arthedain and figuring those out. It was
fun trying to keep them straight when we were...
Yes. Well, the game really helps a lot in that way, I find.
But it takes that Appendix A material that's all just annals, and this is the year that the fell winter came and they were eaten by wolves and so forth, and turns it into a story with characters that, which is, I'm sure, what Tolkien would have eventually done if he'd had 7 lifetimes to flesh out every one of those stories. And
exactly, yeah. I mean, I love the stories about the fall of Fornos and, sort of the betrayal of Amarthael and the 4 guardians, right, who defected and everything. I think that those stories are really great. But then, of course, we get to Numenus, where I've been spending some time lately on Mythgard Mondays, and we see this glimpse of the early stages, right? Long before that, this glimpse of the city of Elendil itself. We just did a couple weeks ago. We just did the throne room of Elendil, and I must have spent like 15 minutes. At the end of that, after we killed off the last of the bosses, just kind of wandering around the throne room and looking at, really looking at especially the sort of the heraldry of the Arnorian symbols,
right,
and the way that they're arranged in the stars and the ship motifs and everything that we get. It's really well done, and it's really interesting. One of the things that it led me to think, especially thinking towards Gondor, where you guys are working now, so much of the Eriador world, right? It has the fingerprints of old Arnor all over it, right? You're always running into these ruins, and whether you're talking to the Dunedain themselves or even other people who are living in the ruins, or meeting the hillmen who are so descendants of old Rhudaur or whatever, you're always running into these things, and almost every region is in some way or another relating itself back more or less. Explicitly, self-consciously towards that earlier history. Whether you are among the treasure seekers in Fornost and hanging out with them, with Colbert the Mad and the others, or whether you're in Evendim preventing people from seeking treasure in the ruins and trying to prevent those people who go in and steal relics from this. But again, in all of them, they're connected with this larger sense and scope of Arnorian history. And I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about how you've kind of handled the transition to moving into Gondor, which of course is even more actively related to its history, right? And you have still the living realm down there, but one which is really dwelling under the shadow of its glorious past, and and how you see that that transition moving down from the north, where it's really just ruins and relics,
right,
down to the living land of Gondor.
Well, I mean, a lot of that played into our content from last year with the Corsairs and the defense of Dol Amroth and the fighting at Pelargir, and there is an incredibly rich and detailed history that Tolkien worked up of the fights between between Gondor and Umbar, and the multiple different ways that they clashed. Certain kings being killed in Pelargir, and then people going to Umbar and overthrowing that repeatedly.
Right.
And we were able to work a lot of that in, obviously through the heirs of Castamere.
Right.
That's right out of the histories, and we've been able to pull that through even in bits of that even into the upcoming update. That's the full story of the Castamere stuff still has some loose ends to tie up.
Right.
So wait, are you going to be able to bring in some Gothic named people from the southern Mirkwood area?
Maybe one day.
Maybe
one day.
Mavi and Marhiwini and Marhari.
Yeah, that would. The difficulty with those guys. Now. Yeah, exactly. The difficulty with those guys is like where the rights exactly, where the discussion of them actually happened, might put
fair bit of that's in the appendices.
It is in the appendices.
In the appendices.
Really. Yeah.
I have an article I wrote on like what Tolkien is doing by giving these people Gothic names, because if you take the names, so this will bring Rohan more than Gondor, we can spread out. If you take all the lists of the kings of Rohan, right? These are all Anglo-Saxon words for king.
Yes.
It's like a bad joke. We talked about this, right?
Yeah.
Like Theoden and Thengel and Fengel and Helm. The only one that doesn't make sense there is Deor.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't, beloved. Why? It maddens me. But then, it's Errol the Young. Well, he's not a king. He's just an Errol.
Right.
And his father is Leod, which means leader of the people.
Right.
And those guys are the ones descended from the same sort of people as those Gothic named ones. So Tolkien's kind of saying there, right, that the Goths were the ancestors of the Anglo-Saxons, even though he would never, make an argument in medium avum or something and say, I think the Goths were, because, it fall apart. It doesn't work,
right.
Except in the most speculative sense. However, in the published Beowulf translation, which just came out, and actually in the bit of it that was published in On Translating Beowulf, Tolkien translates Geatland, which should be pronounced Yeatland, but that part where Beowulf is from, as Gothland.
Gothland.
So he's, it's building that synthetic history, right?
Whole thing worked up that.
So why would Beowulf be in Anglo-Saxon, but it never mentions a person from England? It never mentions an English, place. Well, the answer is that at least the Anglo-Saxons thought their ancestors were Goths, either because they'd confused the Goths with the Geats, or because they really were. In other words, the Goths went up and became Geats, and the other ones went down. And so, one of the things I've been really interested in watching over the years as you've developed the game is the kind of different types of men and the social stratifications and the way that they interact with each other, because one of the unfair criticisms of Tolkien is always everything's always black and white for him. These guys are good, these guys are bad, and it's not really true, right?
No,
the Dunlendings aren't all bad, even in the books. They're like, well, Saruman told us you're going to burn us alive, so of course we're fighting.
Yeah, exactly, and it's not like all the people at Rohan and Grima aside, there's still Rohirrim who have not been so great. Fengel is a great example of that, and in Gondor too. I mean, the kinstrife wouldn't have happened if they were all just shiny, happy, friendly people with each other.
What I was going to say that connects with what Corey was talking about is that the Numenorian culture, as it's developing in the game, is getting pretty complex and sophisticated, even though you don't have the Calibeth and the Unfinished Tales material in there, is that the Numenorians weren't all good.
Right.
And it wasn't just that the black Numenorians, obviously not racially black Numenorians, but wearing black jacket. Well, the good guys wear black jackets too, so it's not really helpful. But the guy that the mouth of Sauron came from, and those Numenorian, the Witch King is probably one of those, right? And probably from Umbar, probably from or other renegade Numenorian parts. Well, the good guy Numenorians can be pretty bad and oppressive and colonialist or whatever you
yeah.
want to call it also. And it's nice to see that comes out in the game quite a bit. And it's also interesting to me, now that I'm down into Gondor and we meet various, I'm nominally down into Gondor. I was telling Chris before this started that I went to Gondor with my level 78 or so character and immediately got killed by a deer. I think it was actually a female deer without horns and just, beat me to death in about 3 seconds.
Wait to meet the drop of golden sun.
I walked right into that.
Sorry.
Right into that one. So
I'll be leaving now. Sorry.
So what I'm interested to see is as you've developed this is that strain of the so the Dunedain are good in a lot of ways because they're out of power because their job is protecting the Shire. Not ruling a Numenos and oppressing everyone around them or cutting down all the trees to make ships and stuff. So
I mean, you look at the history of Gondor and they're alarmingly colonial for large chunks of it. I mean, they colonized Rune for a long period of time, and I'm sure that wasn't exactly a happy time for the Easterlings. And the same thing with Harad. And they dominated Umbar for about half of its history. They founded Umbar, so it's kind of theirs anyway. But
there's that. Who does it belong to?
Well, though even that, of course, is left over from Numenorian colonialism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Gondor itself is a colony, and there's all these guys living in the White Mountains who are like, "What are you guys doing?" And
the Numenorians had gone back and forth, right? They had come back to Middle Earth as teachers and helpers, and then they came back as tribute gatherers, and I really like seeing that, developing in the character of places, because in part you are limited by if you have Sauron as the big bad,
right?
And we know that story, and we know everything that's happening. So if you're going to make side stories, they can't all just be about Sauron has an agent.
Yeah, exactly.
Here. A lot of it has to then be desire for power or something. I mean, I'm very interested. I have not played the Corsairs stuff yet, so I mean, I don't obviously you don't want to spoil anything, but are they going to say things like, actually, we're the real heirs of?
I don't really want to spoil that, but there's definitely a lot more complexity in the particularly in the way the people of Gondor react to the Corsair threat, because you have to remember that in the part of the world that all this story's going on, this is the part that supported Castamere back in the day, and it's like it's.
And almost
it's not like those feelings would have completely gone away. There's a lot of people who probably still feel that half-breed Northman Eldakar was not the right king, and everything's gone to pot since then.
And you can also tell, right? You can tell it from Denethor and from some of the soldiers in the books that the Minas Tirith Numenorians look down on everybody else who doesn't live in the city, and everybody else thinks, you guys have it cushy living in the city. We're out here defending against wolves, or actually, they don't actually have to fight the deadly goats.
No,
that's over in Blythe. Well, maybe there could be deadly goats in the White Mountains.
Yeah,
There's no reason that
why not?
Once you've designed an awesome devil goat,
exactly. May as well just push that as hard as we can.
Get different colored ones.
What are they heard in Mordor? Now we know.
Down by the Sea of Nirnen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Why not?
Great plantations of death goats and
death goats.
So, I mean, on the subject of the, we did actually have to differentiate the like Numenorian Gondorians from the sort of racial milieu that came from the interbreeding with the people of the White Mountains. Haven't dealt so much with the Northmen yet because we haven't gotten to that part of Gondor yet, and to a certain extent that sort of all got assimilated anyway into what's in Minas Tirith and so forth, and all the other areas were abandoned. But we were, it was great to be able to explore that and actually introduce characters who are on the Gondorian side who aren't who aren't like just white, pale, gray-eyed, dark-haired paragons of what the British colonial view was back in the day. There's certainly a lot more room for racial complexity, even in what Tolkien wrote, without even extrapolating stuff. But then once you start looking at it, it's like, well, why can't some of the lords of Gondor be, effectively black? There's no reason why that can't be so. In fact, there probably would be a lot of that down there.
Yeah.
And and the
Harrod isn't that far away.
Right, and there's been a lot of
100 miles. It's not like 1,000 miles more. It's
We're not talking
closer to
Minas
Minas Tirith.
Africa here,
Isn't it closer to Minas? Isn't like around the corner of Mordor to Far Harrod? Isn't that closer to Osgiliath and Minas Tirith than the Shire is?
Probably,
in actual miles.
And there's definitely thematic ties between Gondor and like the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, and there was certainly a lot of diversity in both of those, a lot more than necessarily.
Tolkien said Minas Tirith looked like Venice. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's interesting that like people sort of read, because he only really deals with a small set of characters who are all
the same
Numenorian, basically two families in Gondor, and that's it.
Right.
We don't really get to see the breadth of things.
And the dumb master of healing.
Yeah,
who doesn't know
right. And so the whole racial politics of Tolkien of Middle Earth has sort of been confined to that sort of notion, and it's actually much broader than that in both the North and the South, in both Gondor and Harrod, and it's been nice to be able to expand that out a bit, and not and avoid the Tolkien the cliche that people have Tolkien about. Oh, he was all about white people beating on people from other lands, and that's
and in reading his stuff, that's really not what
it really is.
Especially the real if you want to put it, the real racism in Middle Earth is elves looking down on everybody.
Well,
else.
Exactly.
And everybody loves the elves. You don't want to say that,
Right?
That's a tough question. If that's
that's so we have a question here from Greymaster saying, what will your thoughts be on whether LOTRO should touch the second prophecy of Mandos and Daggerath?
The dagger, that would be
Daggerath. The Daggerath.
Battle of Battles.
Yeah.
It's the final battle.
Well,
So are you going to bring like Turian back to kill Melkor?
Absolutely. That's wait till in 2026.
That's right.
I mean, a lot of stuff like the prophecies of Mandos and such are just well beyond
I think Christopher would say he doesn't understand the second prophecy of Mandos material either. I mean, that's the problem is it's so elliptical, and a lot of times Christopher summarizes rather than quotes for some of the material there, because he said it was too messy to fit to it wasn't really thought through. I mean,
and Tolkien dropped it so early. I mean, it's been since what, the 40s or 30s that he said anything about that.
Yeah.
Really. I mean,
and frankly, for our purposes in the game, it's not really in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, so we can't do much at all with it.
And I would actually add in there that if as he said multiple times, I know Paul Kocher went too far with this, with what was it, mammoths and pterodactyls or some goofiness, but it's supposed to be our world.
Right.
So if that's the case, the second prophecy of Mandos can't come until at least tomorrow, and so we have a really long way to. I mean, I'm not trying to just be like, snotty about this or whatever. I get where that's coming, where that idea is coming from, and a final battle and even how you work in the prophecies. But I think the answer is that Tolkien hadn't figured it out, and we would be we'd have no guide whatsoever, not even a general one.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you mesh in all clearly a lot of stuff's going to happen before then, including the world turning kind of into our world, who knows what the heck is going to happen.
You have to have if we're going to go the religious side of it, you have to have the incarnation of Jesus, because that's what is predicted in there. The Afterbeth says, this is the best thing and it's going to happen. So then you've got that, then you've got 2,000, or more
I'm not
years.
sure I'm prepared to put Jesus in the game yet.
It would be controversial.
Yes, a little bit.
I guess you have to go far to the east of Middle Earth.
Talk about
over there.
Talk about unforeseen.
And talk about a way to offend absolutely everyone.
Right.
There would be no. What is that? The line that I can't remember what the context was, but one of my students said this. Somebody said something, and she said, "Nothing good will come of that."
Yes,
that's my line
pretty much,
on that.
Yeah.
So we got another question from Elenmir. How much can you touch on Numenor and Gondor history? That's interesting, because it's a really, this gets into the rights issues that we that we have to deal with for LOTRO, where we have access to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but things like the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales belong to Christopher Tolkien and the Tolkien estate, and we're not allowed to touch them. And I am not going to make any judgment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does limit what we are. We can use the appendices in certain ways, and so we can touch on some parts of Gondorian history. Certainly not to the extent that we were able to cover Rohirric history, because Rohirric history is pretty much almost all in the appendices.
Mm-hmm. Though the stuff that seems to me to be outside the purview, that is what we get about Gondorian and Numenorian history outside of the appendices, right, is primarily either the really big picture stuff that we get in the Silmarillion, right, Elrond and Elros and all that stuff, or the really, really detailed stuff that we get in Unfinished Tales, right, about like their units of measure and their military formations,
right,
and all of those kinds of things. Which would be handy, I'm sure.
It would be handy to be able to pull off of that. It's not. Gondorian culture, as described in the books, is virtually non-existent. By the time he gets to that, the plot momentum is such that he's not messing around with, with greeting cups and weapon takes and such.
Right. And then the big thing that you do miss from not having the Silmarillion, right, is that the rise and fall of Numenor, which you can put together from Faramir's discussion about what a Numenor that is lost now, but you don't have the exact details of Ar-Pharazôn. Like, I don't think there's anything in the appendices. I guess it does say that Ar-Pharazôn attacked the Blessed Lands, but it doesn't have the whole landed, walked through the deserted city, and had the mountain fall on him, and all of that stuff.
It's best just, I've found that it's best just to leave stuff like that alone, and we just play with what little crumbs we can glean without going into the Silmarillion.
But you have the overall ethos that you can, which we talked about earlier, right? Which is that the Numenorians were arrogant, and they were seeking after an eternal life that they shouldn't have. It's the fruition of whatever Morgoth's and Sauron's lies and stuff, but that they had sort of lost their gratitude for being, so they'd been the good guys and that you probably can't have because it's only in the Silmarillion. They were the good guys in the first Age wars, and then they got rewarded. And then they got entitled, and they, got punished.
And then you've got the remnants of the ones who didn't go in that direction, right? Who then came, and that's what I love about the Arnorian heraldry and stuff. The way, and all of the references to stuff that you can't talk about all that much, but which gets in there, like the prevalence of the star within all of the heraldry in Arnor, in the ruins. So you've got the faithful, right? Elendil and his people came and built Numenus, are remembering the land of the star, right, and the land of gifts. So there's that
I always
gesture
wonder how Elrond feels all about this. I wonder if Elrond feels a little bit like Christopher Tolkien does about
my dad is everywhere.
And everyone's marketing off these petty kingdoms are wearing my dad's star, my dad's stuff, and he's like, that's my father, right? And this came up in my students too. Like, I don't know, anyone's free to use this. We came up with it in class, but if you ever really wanted to do a Monty Python-esque style insult to Elrond, you could say, your mother was a seagull and your father lives in a flying boat.
Yeah, that's true.
You'd be accurate. I don't know why it's an insult, but it does have that Monty Python feel. But I do wonder about, like that, Tolkien says it somewhere talking about Beowulf, that the difference in Middle-earth was you could actually go to Camelot and King Arthur was there, and he was alive, and he'd been there for 6,000 years, and that was that Bilbo in The Hobbit just doesn't get who he's talking to.
Right.
Yeah.
When he's talking to Elrond.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. And there's even still that memory of that, with him being told that it takes some cheek to write verses about.
He had a very song about Arendelle.
Yeah. It's like he still doesn't quite get it.
What if Elrond's like, no, it actually wasn't like that.
The scabbard was not of Chalcedony.
It was not. It was
totally
Chalcedony. He threw that out. It didn't work. It was too heavy.
That was ridiculous.
See, Chris, you need a Chalcedony scabbard somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. We should get that in there. So we have another question from Fremoth. What are you guys thinking about when you get towards Mordor? Will we get there before or after the ring does? Well, I think there will definitely. I think I can. It would be foolish of us not to show Mordor before the ring gets there, because after the ring gets there, Mordor is very different from what.
Some significant real
estate
changes.
There are a few ownership kind of shifts.
I think they mean before the ring gets to Kirith Ungol.
Before it gets to Kirith Ungol,
so we have a week to explore.
Yeah, exactly.
Mordor.
Oh my God, the timelines are making my head split open at this point. But we're going to. If once we get to Mordor, I want to show it as the seething den of viciousness and evil that it is before the fall of Barad-dûr. Certainly, I want to show Barad-dûr. So we.
Well, I had a question. I mean, I don't want you don't want to give stuff away.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get to explore like Minas Morgul or Barad-dûr, even though they're so cool and everyone wants to explore them, because they will be filled to the gills with impossible to kill monsters.
Yeah.
So maybe you should do it after they've been emptied out and everyone went to Gondor.
We have some thoughts. We're definitely turning on all of this stuff, like how we're going to handle.
Explore Minas Morgul and see what it's like.
I want to explore Minas Morgul too. Don't get me wrong. Especially having seen the glimpses of the inside of it in the histories when Frodo and Sam actually went in there at one point in one of the drafts. So it's like, well, that I have to go to there now. And
as much as you like Dol Guldur, which is very cool to be inside Dol Guldur in that part. I mean, the problem is now you've set yourself a bar.
Yeah, Dol Guldur and Carn Dûm, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, we have to do
but more red carpets.
Yeah, there's lots of red carpets. But yeah, I mean, we'll.
I love Dol Guldur. I love running around in there.
Yeah, I that was one of the fun. One of the fun places to get to from the lore before the movies did. One of the few times we got to do that. But.
Right. Yeah. Well, your Dol Guldur is better than the movie
thank
one,
you. That's
significantly.
Perhaps ours is the one that's been rebuilt in the intervening 60 years since the crumbling thing that was in
and also your Goblin Town sort of got there first in terms of I remember when I went to that movie, I'm like, I've seen this, I've played this. If you jump off there's a pit and you end up with trolls.
Okay, what Arathart, help. Arathart.
Yeah.
What is the most important departure from the lore that LOTRO has made, or are there any, and if so, why that particular thing? I mean, it depends on what you mean by departure from lore. Obviously, a lot of our stuff is departure from lore as much as we're extrapolating. So, I mean, I guess our most important departure from lore was the whole Marthiel saga.
Yes.
That made up the first book of the epic.
But I don't think there's anything in that contradicts the lore.
There's nothing if we're talking about contradiction,
it's coming back from being killed multiple times, like it's game mechanic stuff, right?
Game mechanic stuff, yes.
Slaughtering things, like there's no, you need kill 10 rats quests, right? But I can't imagine that Tolkien would ever have go out and kill animals.
Right.
Yeah.
He was very soft touch on that. He would not have been, please go kill 10 bears because there's too many scary bears around here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've killed so many thousands of bears. I think we discussed this last time. My hatred of the bears in the Shire because of how many times they killed me.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, for departures from the lore, like if we're talking about actually contradicting the text, we've only done that specifically in a very, like, I can count them on one hand, where it was necessary for narrative purposes because the timelines just get so gnarled up.
I mean, would you count I'm not going to give it the total spoiler, but that there's an unaccounted for Palantir as departing from lore, since they were said to have all been lost with Varvedwi, or
no, the one that's found is not what was not lost with Arvedwi, and it was because I found out that the Osgiliath stone was no longer. We'd already played that card when we by the time we got to Osgiliath,
because then that's actually a place where not using Unfinished Tales helps you.
Yes.
Right? Because
Absolutely.
in Unfinished Tales, the Osculia Stone is like this big around.
Exactly.
It requires a semi-truck to move it. So no one's carrying that around.
Specially constructed table on which
we were talking for the people. We were talking about earlier that like one of the things is that in Unfinished Tales, so not in any of the game or anything, Tolkien says that Palantiri had to be a foot in diameter.
Right.
And that's just not workable, right? It can't be that. It has to be the size it is in the film, because if it's I measured, it's a basketball made of rock. Gandalf is not keeping it under his arm in a bundle, and Pippin is not picking it up and running with it, rock. So anyway,
it's magical. So
that's why you could use the Osculia stone.
But we've done it in a couple other places as well, and particularly with regard to the Grey Company, because we wanted to pull them more into the story, so we had to mess with their timeline just a little bit in order to make them work. Right. It pained me to have to be like, yeah, okay, go ahead and do that. But it served the story in a very interesting way, and it didn't really have a major impact on the overall
because it eventually
Tolkien
comes
story.
back together.
Yeah. I mean, if they're somewhere slightly different, a couple days in advance, it's not like we're dealing with the Ride of the Rohirrim, where it's absolutely crucial that they be at a certain point at a certain time.
Well, and that's one of the things, though. I mean, in broad terms, it's one of the things that I have found so impressive about all of the extrapolated storylines and regions and populations that we see in the game, is they fit very well with the lore. I mean, they're very consonant. There are very few times that I've come across something that I was like, this is a little weird. It doesn't really seem. And the only thing I can think of is the Earthkin, who are a little odd.
Yeah, the Earthkin. They have a whole checkered history
But you got to use Finnish-looking names.
We did, yes, it's true. So that was fun.
I mean, there's lots of, if you want to go with different monsters and monsters, I think that Tolkien, all the stuff underneath. You haven't gone a lot in Moria yet, but the kind of the ones that look like they're from Alien, the xenomorph type. Faceless beasts from the Foundations of Stone thing. There's, somebody was having fun with that. And
absolutely.
With fungus-infected orcs, which are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Too. They actually, you haven't done this. This is not too bad of a spoiler. Like when you kill them, then they explode in this cloud of spores. It's kind of excellent, actually. I really like killing the fungus orcs. So there's plenty of monsters, because you and I talked about this years and years ago when you came Chris came to my class and gave a guest talk and said the problem is that in the first third in the Fellowship of the Ring, there's interesting monster after interesting monster, and then after that it's pretty much, and then there were orcs and larger orcs and more orcs
and trolls,
and men hanging out with the orcs, and then there were some more orcs, and get this, 2 different kinds of orcs. Now, I mean, it was like, so you ran out of monsters.
Yeah, by the time you got to the Mumakil, it's like, oh my god, it's an elephant, how exotic. So speaking of...
That only counts as one.
Speaking of Finnish names, Jeremy Firesword asks, I love Forochel as a region, but having read the books, where did you find so much material, especially the dwarves? We made it up for the most part. What's known about the Losoth you could fit in a thimble. They're
called snowmen.
Yes, they are.
And
the
they have
snowmen.
sleds.
They have sleds, and they were buddies with our Vedui, and that's all we know. So, we got to basically make them up whole cloth. And we decided to go sort of Finnish / Sami / Lapland kind of feel for them, because it was geographically appropriate for a setting that's supposed to resemble Western Europe, and also for the reason that Tolkien loved Finnish, and it got us a chance to work some Finnish nomenclature into the game.
What I love about that, the Forochel, is yes, you had to make it up from scratch because so much of it wasn't in there, and yet because of our Vedui and a few other pieces, that's like the most canon part of that quest.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's the spot, and it's everything that happened, and he tells the story of what happened, and the story of our Vedui was one of the ones that I wanted to tell from the get-go, because it's kind of awesome, and it's tragic, and
and no one has really ever touched on it, so it was great. As far as the dwarves up there go, that was really, when we up till the point where we got to Gondor. Even when we got to Gondor, one of the things when I was fleshing out a region, I would always ask, okay, what can we put here that's not men? Because a lot of these areas are just men, and so we tried to figure out places we could stick elves, dwarves, and hobbits that aren't the Shire and Rivendell and Erebor, that still make a kind of sense. And certainly, the end of Forochel is the top end of the Blue Mountains, so it makes sense that there would still be some dwarvish stuff up there. Similarly, when we got down into Endedwythe, there's relievings of both dwarves and there's fairly run-down hobbits down there as well, and we worked elves into the area around Ethelond in Gondor, because we want to be able to keep these other races sort of on the table and not just have them totally disappear from the story.
This leads me to a question I had for you that, like, when you came and talked to my class, that I forgot to. It seems like that you have de-emphasized the dour hand bad guy dwarves as the material. Were people just not? Were they uncomfortable about killing dwarves?
There's a discomfort
because
to that.
I kind of was like, I don't mind killing people. That's all.
Yeah, I know.
They're
It's
everywhere.
kind of weird.
But I wouldn't want to kill. Like, even you had to make those the mutant inbred hobbits, the bad hobbits.
Yeah.
What are they called in Endedwythe? I can't remember. Like they're not boggarts, but they run in little groups like the boggarts.
Yeah.
And they, those, they looked mean and they were okay to kill. And it's okay to kill like people because they're bad, and orcs are no problem.
Yeah.
But the dour hand dwarves, it's like you're shooting Gimli, and
Yeah.
I just wondered, was there
we
a
never meet any
de-emphasis,
really
or?
bad dwarves in the literature,
Right.
except
We
unless
hear
you count
about them,
Thorin
yeah.
for a moment and Meme in the Sons
Well,
of
and
Hurin.
whichever anonymous dwarves massacre Thingol. And
Yeah.
all
There's
else
definitely
there.
a lot of that in the lore, and certainly just there's no love lost by the time of the Hobbit between the elves and dwarves, and they were going to slaughter each other. But it's just as enemies, they're more pressing enemies too than the dour hands by the time you get into other parts of the world. So I wouldn't say they won't ever resurface.
It wasn't
but
like a
they're
feedback thing, like people like, I don't like killing dwarves.
I don't think so. No, I think it was just that the focus shifted over to other parts of the world, and are the dour hands done? Probably not. But
I actually really liked it.
You like killing the
you like
dwarves?
killing the dwarves?
Maybe it's that the dwarves are just because I play a hunter,
Right.
and they're really hard to kill because they have armor, and they tend to require a lot more shots than like an orc or something.
Right. No, I just because I thought it was interesting to get into even the fact that the very fact that there are two different tribes of dwarves and that they're not the same is part of the
seven,
plot.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But the fact
And
that
all we have are long beards and dour
beards
hands
and
right
dour
now.
hands.
Yeah.
But there is a list somewhere,
Yes.
online, I think.
Yeah.
That can be your excuse all the time.
Yes,
I didn't look in Unfinished Tales. I found it online.
Well, I mean, the dour hands were our creation. I don't know what the actually what the.
That phrase "dour-handed" is used somewhere, though.
It's. I can't
I
remember if
think
it's
it's
used
in The Hobbit, yeah.
I can't remember if it's used in. Is it used in Tolkien? I feel like it might be used in Beowulf or something.
No. The dour. It's in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields,
Yes.
and it says
Yes.
the dour-handed Dunedain.
dour-handed
Yes, that's dour-handed
Right.
Dunedain. That's
Yeah.
right. That is where I lifted it from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was the basis for the tribe and place names of the Eriador Hillmen, like Creoth and Trevgalorg and Aghire? All of the non-Numenorian people in the north, we decided, since we have the Northmen who are Germanic, basically the Gothic / Anglo-Saxon, and we have the Numenorians who are the Numenorians, and again playing with who. We're pulling in from real world cultures to sort of make make equivalency similar to how the Rohirrim were made equivalent to the Anglo-Saxons.
Well, that's what Tolkien did, right? He wanted to make the map, match up. So the dwarves and the people who live up in where we haven't gone yet have Scandinavian.
Right. Yeah. They have Scandinavian names.
And then the Rohirrim have Anglo-Saxon.
So there's
possibly the Dunlendings. There's I just got a paper submitted for Tolkien studies because they're called Forgoil. Mm-hmm. That's Celtic. So your Celtic thing was right on.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as my initial thought was Bree was and a lot of the Chetwood those are all Welsh Coombe, and Coombe and all those words are very Celtic, and the Bree folk are part of the whole sort of mountain folk diaspora that goes from all the way from Rudar and Angmar right down to the White Mountains. So for various parts of that I decided we'd just pull in. Find another Celtic language to murder and name things after that. So we've never done Irish because Irish scares the bejesus out of me, and Tolkien didn't like Irish very much either. But
that's a little bit of a mythology that he didn't like Irish. That's based on one line in one letter, but he went there every summer for 15 years straight and graded exams to make extra money.
All right, that's good
with Irish,
to know.
the issue is and the big thing in Irish is just that the spelling system is was
that's what scares me about having to do
a Roman alphabet and a non-Roman language and lots of changes. The Irish it's not that it's an impossible language to learn to speak. It's just very, very hard for English only speakers to learn to read it. So you could steal from that.
And certainly the relationships between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings are in a lot of ways similar to the relationships between the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts who were there before them. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to make them sort of equivalent. And it also gave us a chance to give them a culture rather than just them being a bunch of hairy brown guys who want to kill the Strawheads. So up in Angmar we made it more like Scots Gaelic, and down in Dunland it was more Welsh, and then we get into the White Mountains it's more Cornish and Breton and other Celtic languages. So that's
and if you ever get out into Rune though, because you have both the Scandinavian Iroquois and Bjorning area, which should sort of be Scandinavian languages, and then the Gothic can go out there. And then when Éomer and Aragorn go hunting for cows, they are cow, right? The giant wild kine, they go cow hunting. I mean, that has to be an episode of cow hunting or something.
Aragorn and Éomer go cow hunting.
That's what happens when they go out drinking.
It makes them seem so much less heroic. What are we going to do? We're going to go
depends on the cow. I mean, it could.
Well, that's true. Well, we were saying this. I've been killed by some of your cows
exactly.
in Dunland.
Some cows are more heroic than others.
Yeah, exactly. We have to build a justification for them to go kill them.
The cow plague.
Yeah. Grothalus, how much aesthetic inspiration will you use from the movies in creating future content? We can't really draw aesthetic inspiration directly from the movies. We can draw from some of the same sources, but we're actually not. The stuff that we make is not supposed to look a lot like the movies for rights reasons because
the movies stole the look. Not stole. That's such a harsh word.
I'm not listening to that. I'm not.
I would just say that
not going there.
But many things that showed up in the look and feel of the movies, in my opinion, showed up in the look and feel of Lord of the Rings Online first. Now that just may mean that they both derive.
I think
as a philologist, they both derive independently from the text. But what dwarvish decoration, architecture, giant heads, and stuff. Now we've seen that in both, and lots of other stuff.
And even the glimpses up towards Gundabad and the shot of Angmar in the third Hobbit film. I was like, golly, that looks familiar.
Some, except for the modernist architecture over Mount Gundabad, which is we brought in I.M. Pei to design our goblin fortress or something.
And we made it completely out of rust.
Corbusier's, the only. Not a fan.
This is a good question for you guys. Toxic Crayon. That is great. Asks, why is Glorfindel, in my opinion, the biggest baller in Middle Earth? That's Toxic Crayon's opinion. Why is he often overlooked?
I have discussed this with my students a lot, and what I always wonder about Glorfindel. Okay, now this requires knowledge that Glorfindel in the Silmarillion, goes one-on-one with a Balrog and kills it, though he dies also.
Right.
Okay, you have to
We call
remember
it-
that.
we call it
Keep
pulling a
that in the
Gandalf.
side. Tell me this. When Elrond is setting up the Fellowship, he says, I could send a great elf lord like Glorfindel with you, but nah, I'm gonna send Pippin.
Right.
Okay? Then, do you think that Gandalf, when he sees the Balrog, goes, Elrond, you son... You like,
We
what
have
we
the guy.
could really use right now is a guy who could solo fight a Balrog, and no, we have Pippin.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think the problem with Glorfindel is I think he would probably Sauron would see him coming. He's kind of he's kind of like this big beacon of elfness that like Sauron's eye would be like, oh, okay, well let's
Send
send
a little GPS marker.
let's send every Nazgul we got.
Or he's got going like a Geiger counter to detect.
But
the
Glorfindel
proximity
was
of
originally
elves.
going to be part of the Fellowship in the early drafts.
Right.
So, and I
Which
think
is-
Tolkien realized, oh my God, this guy's way overpowered for the story I
Which
want to
is
tell.
interesting because that's how the Ralph Bakshi movie, which Peter Beagle wrote the script for, replaces. So you know,
Right.
where Arwen rides up in the Jackson movie, where it's Glorfindel in the book, it's Legolas, but who has the Glorfindel type powers.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
in the Bakshi film.
and, but see, one of the things that makes Tolkien so much. How do you say this? We're talking about elves. I'm saying it feels more realistic. Is that characters come in, they do something, and they just disappear. But then when you read Tolkien's drafts, it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah.
Like Tom Bombadil was going to show up like 6 more times. Like, you know, they're captured by the Black Riders, and then Tom Bombadil shows up riding on a horse, and then, you know, Glorfindel is going to come on the Fellowship and do all this elf stuff.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see that like his dropped threads are what makes Lord of the Rings. It makes it less tight. If you were in the creative writing class, you'd be told, you know, do the Arwen thing or do
Yeah,
the Legolas thing.
exactly.
But by making it less tight, there's 2 pieces that happen. One is it gets this feel that it's a real history.
Yes.
Rather than a story or even an epic story. And 2, from your guys' point of view, that's
Oh,
all
it's
the hooks.
fantastic that he drops Glorfindel because that puts him on the table for us. I
Or
mean,
like dropping Tom Bombadil,
Yep.
and then you can bring him in that end of that one quest.
Right,
where
yeah.
he shows up.
Yeah,
on
and
elves.
like what the heck happens to Radagast? What happens to what's Halbrand up to up until the Grey Company shows up? There's all these guys that are just like that he just picks up and drops. Like he makes a big deal out of Haldir in Lothlorien, and that there's
Erkenbrand.
Erkenbrand. Oh, Erkenbrand. Well, wait till Erkenbrand comes, and then they leave
we'll
him
be fine once
behind.
Erkenbrand shows up, and then he does nothing.
He does nothing.
He has
Sending
a red banner with a red horn, or
Oh,
he's
he
a
has a red
horn.
shield.
Red shield.
Rides down the
And a
hill with
black
his
horn,
guys
that's
running
it.
behind him, and that's the last thing he does, and then they
Everyone's
leave him
nuts.
behind.
Like, it's Erkenbrand, yay!
But see, that's one of the. I mean, lots of people have talked about this, of course, but that's one of the things that gives Tolkien's story that sense of depth, right?
Well, that's
Yeah.
what makes it, and it makes it like Beowulf very
Right.
much. So I'm writing about this a lot. Like what he took from Beowulf. There's a famous line in Beowulf. It's the dumbest line in the whole poem, but it's in its beautiful dumbness, which is that after Grendel's mother has come and ran off with Ashera, right? Beowulf has no idea that this happened, and he shows up and he's like, "So, Hrothgar, sleep well last night? Everything good?" And Hrothgar's, "No, sorrow is renewed. Ashera is dead. Ermenlaf's older brother."
And who's
He
Ermenlaf?
never mentions
Yeah.
Ermenlaf. Why should we care? Why is that the first thing? Your guy is dead. My best counselor, Ermenlaf's older brother too, not like his little brother or something. And that gives you the sense, right, that that there's a whole story here that the people involved knew, and they knew. Oh my gosh, Ermenlaf's older brother. That's how he got killed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Ermenlaf was so like angry or whatever.
Right.
And that's the same like. Tolkien with Erkenbrand shows up out of nowhere, or
there's whole other books to be written
Absolutely.
in theory about all this
in
stuff.
fact, I liked a lot what you guys did with Rohan and the power struggles that were going on in Rohan and the difference of opinion and like. Look,
Yes.
we gotta we're not going to Minas Tirith. We'll get, we gotta stay, no, I'm gonna take advantage and get the people who want to take advantage of that. And it's not all, and that's what the best part of it to me is that it's not all just Sauron.
Right.
It is really, in terms of again fighting against that really bad idea that poor man's interpretation of Tolkien, right? That everything's black and white.
Right.
Not at all.
Yeah, and and it's important to do because the players need adversaries they can defeat, and all the major adversaries in the books get defeated by not the players. So introducing this complexity serves a game story purpose as well.
Yeah.
David Rutgers, is there one storyline that you would really love to see implemented in the game but you can't do yet? Yet's in parentheses.
Scouring of the Shire?
Well, yes, I'd definitely like to. We can't do that yet, obviously.
Right.
There's a lot, a lot of stuff in the future that we can't
The
do
Shire
yet.
resistance pre-scouring, like
right.
where the Toots are hiding out.
Yeah, like the Tuckborough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
But the skirmish is a lot like that, actually, because there's
Yeah.
raffians in the Shire. Shire.
Ruffians in the shower.
What? What? Yeah, that was. I'm really happy I said that.
Wow. Okay.
Don't even go there.
Yeah.
That's not a storyline anyone wants to develop.
I mean, I'd personally like to be able to get more into the what history is available to us. I've been very impressed with what Shadows of Mordor has done with its DLC dealing where you get to play as Celebrimbor striving against Sauron. I mean, yeah, yay! That's the sort of stuff that I love, is being able to go back and relive some of the stories that get told in the course of the book. So, my personal thing that I would love to see at some point is the battle at Weathertop, at Amon Sul, where the tower falls. Yeah. Because one, I don't think anyone's ever depicted what the tower looked like before it fell, and two, this is like one of the few times that a sorcerer comes down and blasts everything to hell and gone because the Witch King's involved, and you don't get that opportunity very often in Tolkien, and when you're trying to stay true to the lore.
That would be a great epic battle.
It really would, and there's.
You don't want to have Sauron marching across Eriador with Celebrimbor's body on his standard,
well, that
stuck
too.
full of arrows.
That too. I mean, Battle of Fornost would be fantastic. Yes. Either Battle of Fornost would be fantastic.
And I'd actually like to see the White Council kick Sauron out of Dol Guldur properly.
Yes. Yes.
And find out what the arts of Saruman were rather than hitting people with a stick. Because that's just my opinion, but there was lots of stick whacking and no arts. I liked Galadriel hulking out. That was awesome. But so I mean, those are storylines that I'd love to see. Celebrimbor and a lot of the Second Age elf. You did an amazing job with the Ring Forges instance.
Yeah.
I love the Ring Forges instance,
yes.
but that's after the fact.
That's after
there's nobody forging rings.
Right,
I want to see that.
Yeah.
I want to see that, and I would like to see more. And I'm guessing that you do have this on tap. It's just more Witch King. You've got to have the Glorfindel Witch King prophecy, so that you can have the Eowyn moment.
Right.
And there's so much.
In fact, people want to play. They don't want to watch instances. That's the other. I mean, they
That's
want to
the
play
thing.
in the
They wanna
instances.
play
They
it,
don't want to just watch video.
Yes.
Of, Yeah.
Prophecies is kind of hard to do a prophecy thing without just sitting there and watching people talk. So that's pretty much all the questions we've got. I have a question for the both of you that's not really LOTRO related, but it's more Lord of the Rings related, and that is, say in theory, tomorrow Christopher Tolkien wakes up and says, "Have at it, guys, go!" And
I'm building a theme park.
yeah, well, yes, obviously, yes. There'll be 600 Lord of the Rings lands.
The roller coaster of Mount Doom.
Oh my god! But if I'm thinking more in terms of if it was possible for there to be more books written in Middle Earth, more novels written in Middle Earth, assuming that it's a good writer, that there's all those it's not going to turn into pulp. What story would you want to see written as a book?
If I say I already tried it, does that put my claim on it? Like a dog pee on a fire hydrant or something? I think How the Lord of the Nazgul Went Bad is the story I want to tell, because I think it's the Denethor. I think it's the Denethor story in a worse way, and at least Denethor doesn't take anyone else down with him. and I think that would have been it also, Terry Pratchett at one point said that, if you notice the exact line, it says the Lord of the Nazgul never troubled anyone again in that age of the world. Well, that only lasts a couple, 2 weeks or so.
Exactly.
So, he's over and you can bring him back in some point. But I think, why, I wouldn't have him be that he was always a horrible, dark sorcerer, but very much more, and again, this is the story that George Lucas should have told, but didn't, which is that he's trying his absolute best to save Middle-earth, or save Gondor, or save Umbar, or whatever it is he's saving, and then keeps I'm just going to use a little bit of this lore. You know what? I have this ring on this pillow. I know I shouldn't. I'm not. We're going to just use it right now to defeat these guys. So that's my story that I would want to see told, is the Lord of the Nazgul goes bad.
I would. And this one is hard because it's a longer story, but it's noteworthy for having very few events. The story of Gil-galad. I always found Gil-galad a fascinating character, and from the beginning, that guy. Other than his death and the idea of the Last Alliance, he gets nothing. From his birth in the Silmarillion, he still gets the shaft. We never learn. I mean, he's we're going to send him.
He's the High King after Fingon. No.
Yes. Turgon.
After Turgon gets killed, dies, and he's at the mouths of Sirion, but he doesn't really do anything. And then he's at Lindon, and he just snubs Sauron, but doesn't do anything.
And we get these few glimpses.
But then, again, this is the Jackson movie has it it's just an accident that they hack off Sauron's finger, but it's not.
No.
Gil-galad and Elendil wrestle Sauron to death. Mm-hmm. I want to see that.
When Isildur cuts the ring from his
Sauron's dead already.
He's got his foot on Sauron's neck while he does that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Sauron's but I think Sauron's dead because it says he's been defeated.
Yeah.
And so he's just also my question there.
They're basically looting his corpse.
Yeah. Right. You don't have to do that anymore, but you used to have to click.
There's a lower basis for it.
And but the point there is also where, by the way, I'll throw this out, where are the 9 Nazgul rings being held?
Right.
Yep.
He says that Sauron has them. Well, he's not wearing them.
That's true.
And his body disappears, and are they locked into the foundations of Barad? I know Tolkien would have had a better answer than anything. That's the thing is, when I joke about, like I told you, I got hate mail for joking about plot holes or something, right?
Yeah.
But when I joke about plot holes, the purpose is that Tolkien would have solved that way better. Like if you said, oh, well, what about the eagles flying them all? Tolkien wouldn't have just said, that's stupid. He would have had a better, more complex explanation of why the eagles couldn't be used. And there would have been 6 kingdoms in between, and well, what you don't know about is so.
Absolutely, but I've always found Gil-galad to be
that's really
that's a great one. I have
a remarkable figure, and we get the glimpses of him in Unfinished Tales in Eldarion and Arendis, right, with the letters that we get from Gil-galad back to the King of Numenor, a little glimpse of his realm and what's going on.
Yeah, and you can get more of Círdan in there too, because he kind of gets short shrift too.
Absolutely. Those are both they have this real mythic presence.
And of course, Elrond's early days.
How do you rate that though? Because if Elrond's 6,000 years old, Círdan's 60.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's been there forever.
Built another boat.
Yeah. From the Diary of Círdan Shipwright. Built yet another boat.
Boat number 486,200. Yeah.
And so for me, I think the story that I would personally want to write if it came up would be the Heart of Darkness style exploration and investigation of what happened to the Blue Wizards, and whether
they went bad,
or did they go bad, or what's how did they meet different fates? There's so much. Obviously, we don't. The Blue Wizards get some of the shortest shrift in the entire Legendarium, really. But the notion that they were out there and maybe they had a part to play in the war, and we just never found out because it was so far behind enemy lines. And then were they around in the Fourth Age at all? Who knows? And I think that would be a great thing to explore if it was done respectfully and the rights were there and all of that.
It also, and who knows if the copyright regimes of the world are going to change at some point.
Well,
You're not going to be able to copyright an imaginary world as opposed to the actual words on the page. That's still never been really litigated.
And there might be some guy in Russia toiling away like they did with that
the Black Book of
the Black
the Last Ring Bearer.
The Last Ring Bearer. But
there is somewhere online someone did a map of like the rest of Middle Earth to try to show that like Mordor was just the buffer protecting against the Imperial invasion, and it's a land of plenty and everything else on the other side of it. And, yeah.
Okay, well,
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Well, thanks a lot for coming by and doing this chat with us. It's always fun doing it. I hope we can do it a bunch more times in the future.
And I think I'm doing a talk for Mythgard in a couple weeks.
Oh yeah, okay.
In March on Tolkien's Beowulf and what Tolkien figured out about Beowulf with just using his unaided brain. We are now sort of figuring out is consistent with a lot of very advanced computerized analysis and stuff like that. So, the professor, he was kind of ahead of everybody.
Are there details about the talk on?
You can find that on our webpage, mythgard.org. It's near the end of March, or 23rd.
Yeah, 23rd, second or third, or 20, something around there.
Okay, great. So it's coming. That's going to be open to everybody. It'll be a live lecture, open to everybody. That'll be great. That'll be really great. And people who want to join the Mythgard kin for Mythgard Mondays, 9:30 server time, Landreval, Burton Baby Pub usually.
Okay, great.
So. Well, that's a smart place to find.
It is.
It's totally obvious when someone else thinks of it, but not for me.
And it's often really funny when we're sitting there. We'll have there'll be 50 people sitting around in the courtyard, and somebody will come running in on a quest. And
whoa, what happened? Yeah. Well, that was the first time I wandered through Weatherstock by accident. I had no idea what was going on, and I go up there to do some quest, and I'm like, what are all these people doing here?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got Gondor to build, so we should sign off. Thanks everyone for watching us and listening to us rattle on at great length, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
See you in the game.
That's right.